Hey guys, in today's video I bring you an unbelievable and transformative story. Let's meet Dr. Lucian Wakefield, a renowned heart surgeon who never believed in God until he died for 17 minutes and was forced to face a truth that science never taught him. What he saw on the other side, the living light, hell as the absence of God and Jesus Christ himself, will completely change the way you see life and death. The most impressive? He returned with an urgent mission. So, before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now get ready for a story that will shake your certainties and open your mind to something much bigger. My name is Dr. Lucian Wakefield. All my life I dedicated myself to medicine, to surgical precision, to verifiable facts. I've spent decades opening human chests, repairing diseased hearts, and observing the body's chemical reactions like a mechanic examining a machine. And for me, that's what we were. Machines. Sophisticated, yes, but still biological machines. I always believed that consciousness was nothing more than a product of the brain, that everything we call the soul was just a jumble of electrical impulses. The truth, however, doesn't care what we believe. She simply is. The irony of all this is that I've spent my entire career studying the human heart, and in the end, it was my own heart that betrayed me. Or maybe it saved me. I was never a man to believe in destiny, but today I know that that was no coincidence. There is a time for everything, and my time to die came on an ordinary afternoon, in the middle of a medical lecture, in front of an audience of skeptical colleagues who, like me, never imagined that death was not the end. The auditorium was full. More than 300 doctors and researchers listened attentively as I spoke about advances in minimally invasive surgeries. I liked speaking. There was a certain pleasure in teaching, in showing the evolution of science, in seeing the admiration in the eyes of young surgeons who would one day follow in my footsteps. The projector displayed detailed images of a mitral valve being repaired without the need for a complete chest opening. A feat of modernity, proof that we were beating biology. And then the pain came. It was like a sudden punch right in the center of my chest. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore it. I continued talking, but my voice shook. I tried to disguise it. I ran my hand over the lectern, pressing my fingers against the wood. Sweat broke out on my forehead. The pain increased. It radiated up his left arm, a crushing weight in his chest. I knew the symptoms, every one of them. Acute myocardial infarction. Dr. Wakefield? Everett Calloway's voice came from somewhere to my right. He was in the front row, frowning, noticing my discomfort. I raised my hand as if to say, "It's okay." It wasn't. A part of me knew I should sit down, ask for help, but my arrogance wouldn't let me. I was a renowned heart surgeon. My heart couldn't fail, but it failed. The vision became blurred. The auditorium spun. The weight on my chest became unbearable. The faces around me blurred. The last thing I heard was someone shouting my name before everything went black. The silence was the first thing I noticed. An absolute, heavy silence, as if the sound no longer existed. There was no pain. There was no heaviness in the chest, nor the tingling in the arm. For a moment I thought I was dreaming. But then I looked down. Avi, my own body. He was stretched out on the floor of the stage, with his head lolling to the side. Everett Calloway was kneeling beside me, squeezing my wrists, checking vitals. "He's stopping." I heard his voice, firm but full of urgency. Doctors rushed from all sides. A defibrillator was hurriedly brought. I knew exactly what was happening. I saw Everett tear my shirt with scissors. The gel was spread on my chest. The blades have been positioned. Loading. Clear. My body spasmed from the shock, but I continued up there. It floated. I was light. No weight, no pain. Something impossible to describe took hold of me, not fear, but a strange curiosity. I saw everything, but not with my eyes. It was something bigger, deeper. I could perceive everything around me with impossible clarity. I could hear people's heartbeats in the room, as if each of them were an instrument in an invisible orchestra. I felt what they felt. Everett's concern. The disbelief of Michael Harrington, a former student of mine who was watching from the audience. This can't be happening, he thought. And I heard that thought as if it had been said out loud. That's when I understood. You was dead. And strangely, it didn't scare me. I should have been panicking, trying to get back into my body, but instead I accepted. The weather felt different. There were no minutes or seconds. Just the realization that it was real. And as absurd as it seemed, something in me knew that it's always been like this. But then something happened that changed everything. The auditorium around me began to disappear. It wasn't a blackout. It was as if reality dissolved, like ink mixing with water. The ceiling, the walls, the people, everything was being sucked away, while a light appeared before me. And that light, she lived. The light was not just an intense glare. She was alive. It pulsed, it vibrated, and inside it there was something that my rational mind could never explain. It wasn't like looking at the sun or any other common light source. She recognized me. I felt it. I was overcome by a sensation I had never experienced before. It wasn't just heat. It was an overwhelming love. Something so vast, so absolute, that it made everything I had ever felt before seem insignificant. The light enveloped me, passed through me, and within it, I was known through and through. Every mistake I made, every hard word I uttered, every successful surgery, every life I touched, for better or for worse. That light knew all about me. But there was no trial, just a love that disarmed any resistance. That's when I heard it. My name. Lucian. It was no ordinary sound. It didn't come from a specific place. The voice filled everything, and when I heard it, it was as if for the first time I truly understood the meaning of my own name. And then before me he appeared. My mind struggled to comprehend. All my life I have rejected the idea of God, of any divine entity, and especially of any religious figure. But there it was, he. And me, you knew what was Jesus. He wasn't like the paintings. He was not the European Jesus of Renaissance paintings. He was so much more. Her hair had a golden glow, but not like physical gold. It was something that seemed to reflect an inner light. His skin radiated heat, as if absorbing and returning the very essence of the light around him. His eyes, God, those eyes, they changed. From amber to blue. From blue to a deep shade of green. It was like did not have a fixed color but reflected something much larger than I could understand. I couldn't speak. He looked at me, and at that moment, I felt everything. Time, eternity, all the answers I sought in science, everything was but in that look. And then he smiled. You have always sought truth through science. Now you will see even greater truths. And before I could react, he touched my forehead, and my consciousness exploded. It was as if my entire being was pulled out of reality. Suddenly, I saw the beginning of everything. I was no longer in that place of light. I was at the creation. Time is no longer a line. I wasn't just watching. I was living every moment of existence. I saw the absolute void before the universe. A silence that was not just the absence of sound, but the absence of everything. And then there was a thought. A thought that was not a voice, but a pure intention. And the moment that thought happened, the universe was born. Colossal explosions, the formation of galaxies, each star lighting up like a spark of consciousness. Science never lied. The Big Bang happened, but not as a random event. It was a creation. I saw matter taking shape. I saw gravity shaping the worlds. I saw the earth being woven with absolute precision, like a work of art. Every atom, every cell, every creature, everything connected. And then, the scene changed. The universe dissolved and suddenly I was somewhere else. I was on the cross, not observing. I was inside the very body of Christ. The shock was overwhelming. I felt everything. The weight of my own body hanging. The searing pain of the blackheads in my hands and feet. The air becoming thin, each breath an agonizing struggle. But nothing, compared to what came later. The physical suffering was terrible, but the real pain was different. It was the weight of the world. I felt every sin, every guilt, every human despair. It was such a crushing burden that there was no comparison to anything I had ever experienced, and yet, he endured it. The realization hit me like a revelation. Jesus could have stopped everything. One thought would be enough, and it would be over. But he didn't want to. He chose to continue, for love, for me, for every person who has ever existed and will ever exist. At that moment, I understood what I could never have learned from any medical book. I tried to scream, I tried to let go, but it was too late. I was there. I was living that. And then, the cross disappeared, and the world fell into absolute darkness. The first thing I felt was the cold. It wasn't a physical cold, but an emptiness, an absence of everything. I tried to move, but there was no direction. There was no floor, no ceiling, no horizon, just darkness. For the first time since I had died, I felt scared. I was alone. The moment I realized this, I heard it shouting. But these were no ordinary screams. They were laments. I didn't see anyone, but I felt it. They were presences around me, presences of souls who were damned, but their despair was like a suffocating weight. I felt your emotions, anguish, regret, fear. They knew. They knew they were in that place because chose to turn away from God. It wasn't a punishment. It was not a divine judgment. It was a consequence. The truth hit me like lightning. Hell is not a place of fire and demons with tridents. The hell it is a state. It is the total separation of light from the presence of God. And this absence was unbearable. Time didn't exist there. There was no before or after, just that eternity of emptiness. I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't come out. I tried to move, but there was no body, just my consciousness floating in that sea of despair. Then I felt something, a presence, and I heard his voice. Hell is not a punishment. It is a state we choose. At the same instant, the darkness was torn apart by a light. She enveloped me as if I were pulled out of an abyss. And suddenly everything changed. I was no longer in the void. Now, I was in heaven, and everything around me was love. The first sensation was of peace. It wasn't just tranquility or the absence of pain. It was an absolute belonging. I was at home. Heaven was not a place made of clouds or golden gates. It was a state. The light around me was not just light. She was alive, conscious. And I was inside her, or maybe she was inside me. Every fiber of my being was enveloped by love. A love that demanded nothing. I didn't need to ask where I was. I knew. Understanding came to me instantly. God was always present, even when I denied him, even when I only believed in science, even when I thought I could understand the world without him. And then he appeared. Jesus was before me again. But now I saw it even more clearly. His eyes still changed, reflecting something much larger than my mind could encompass. But what hit me the most was his presence. She wasn't just visible. She filled everything. He looked at me with that absolute love, and once again there was no judgment. And then he spoke. You must go back. My heart, if I still had one in that state, broke. No, I pleaded. I want to stay here. I can't go back. He smiled. Not a smile of refusal, but of understanding. You have a mission. My emotions overflowed. I didn't want to go back. The physical world seemed small, distant to me. After what I saw, how could I live again without this peace? But Jesus just reached out and touched my shoulder. Tell them that I am more real than their doubts, more present than their fears, and more loving than their shame. And before I could say anything else, I was pulled back. The light disappeared. Heaven dissolved. And me. I fell back into my body. The first thing I felt was the weight of my own body. It was as if I had been thrown back into something small and limited. I was back in the flesh, in the physical world. I could hear muffled voices around me. My vision was a blur. The air rushed into my lungs as if I were being ripped out of nowhere and thrown back into existence. Someone exclaimed, "My God, he's back!" My head was spinning, my chest rose and fell rapidly. I was breathing. Then I saw a face above me, Everett Calloway. His eyes were wide, his mouth open in shock. He looked like he had seen a ghost. "Lucian," his voice cracked. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. Little by little, my vision cleared. There were doctors all around me, machines beeping, hands holding me, voices asking me things I couldn't process. But I could only think of one thing. The image of Jesus was still in my mind, as real as the world around me. So, with what little strength I had left, I spoke. My voice was hoarse, almost a whisper, but clear enough for everyone to hear. I saw Jesus. The shock in the room was immediate. I saw expressions of disbelief. I saw doctors exchanging glances. Some frowned. Others looked uncomfortable. Maz Everett. He just stood there, pale, unable to look away. They lifted me onto a stretcher and began to take me to the ICU. My body was still weak, but my mind was clear. And then came the moment that changed everything. When they hooked me up to the heart monitor and started checking my condition, they found nothing. No heart damage, no scars, no sequelae of the heart attack. It was like it had never happened. The doctors were silent, analyzing the tests, trying to find an explanation. But I already knew the answer. Jesus didn't just bring me back. He healed me. Over the next few days, I tried to process everything that had happened. But how can anyone just return to normality after seeing what I saw? The doctors were perplexed. There was no explanation for my recovery. A massive heart attack should have left irreversible sequelae in my heart. But the test showed that he was perfect. Some suggested that there was an error in the equipment. Others tried to justify it by saying that my heart could have gone into fibrillation, but it returned to rhythm on its own. But no one could explain the 17 minutes. 17 minutes, no pulse, no brain activity. It was impossible for me to be there, but I was. While doctors and researchers tried to fit my recovery into some scientific logic, I knew my real struggle would be something else. How do I tell the world what I saw? No one would ever consider me a spiritual man. I spent my life ridiculing patients who talked about near-death experiences. He called them hallucinations of the dying brain, chemical discharges, hypoxia reflexes. And now I was one of them. The first time I tried to tell it was to Everett. "I saw Jesus," I said, looking into his eyes. He didn't laugh. He didn't mock. But he swallowed hard and crossed his arms. "Lucian, you've been through severe trauma. The brain can create false memories in these situations. I have seen heaven, Everett." My voice was shaking. "And I saw hell." His jaw tightened. He didn't want to believe it, but something in him hesitated. The other doctors didn't hesitate. Some looked at me with pity. Others, like Michael Harrington, were more direct. "You're delirious, Lucian. It's a common symptom after cardiac arrest." "Then explain my cure to me," I replied. "Explain to me why my heart is perfect." Silence. They couldn't. It was there that I understood that I had a choice. I could pretend nothing happened, go back to my life, continue operating hearts, ignore everything, or I could embrace the mission given to me. I knew I would be ridiculed, that my career could be destroyed, but Jesus gave me a message, and I couldn't bury her. So, I made my decision. My decision changed everything. At first, I tried to balance my old life with the new understanding I carried, but it didn't take me long to realize that I could never be the same again. I tried to get back into the routine, surgeries, lectures, clinical studies, but everything seemed small, as if I was pretending to be someone who no longer existed. I knew my mission was bigger. I knew I needed to tell the world. I began studying accounts of other near-death experiences. I interviewed patients, reviewed research, tried to find a pattern, and that's when I discovered something that gave me goosebumps. People around the world saw Jesus. Religion didn't matter, the culture didn't matter. People who had never heard of him, they described him in the same way I saw him. The same presence, the same eyes that changed color, the same absolute love. This couldn't be a coincidence. Founding an institute to study the relationship between science and spirituality was my response to those who said I was delusional. I knew I would face skepticism. I knew my reputation as a surgeon could be destroyed. And it was. I was called crazy, a charlatan. Some doctors who previously respected me now despised me. But none of that mattered, because I knew the truth. Science has never contradicted God. She was always part of him. Now, I travel the world sharing my experience. Not to convince anyone, not to convert anyone, but to tell you what I saw. I saw Jesus. I saw heaven. I saw hell. And now I know, without a shadow of a doubt, that we are much more than our physical bodies. If you are reading this and have doubts, fears, or shame about your past, know this. He is more real than your doubts, more present than your fears, and more loving than any guilt you carry. That's the truth. That's my mission now. And nothing you can stop me. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time,